The Infected, a Plague of the Mind. Prologue, 1400 years ago. In the scorching deserts of the past, there was no mercy. A ruthless warlord rose from the dunes, not a man of wisdom, but a pirate of blood. He and his raiders stormed villages, slaughtering men, enslaving women, and trading them like livestock. Gold, power, and control. These were his only gods. He claimed his words came from the heavens, that he was chosen to rule, and anyone who defied him was put to the sword. The world saw him as a savage, but his true genius lay in deception. He did not just conquer lands, he conquered minds. He turned people into blind followers, making them believe that slavery was righteous, war was holy, and women were mere objects for pleasure and trade. He carved his laws into their souls with fear and death, forcing generations to kneel before him. That was the beginning of the infection. Chapter 1. The Fall of Wisdom. 1400 years later, the infection had spread to nearly 2 billion people. It consumed entire civilizations, erased cultures, and twisted the minds of millions. Schools no longer taught critical thinking. Books were burned, histories rewritten, and questioning the infection meant death. At first, the world ignored it. They thought it was just a belief system, a personal choice. They welcomed the infected into their cities, into their governments, into their lives, believing in peace and tolerance. But the infected did not believe in peace. They multiplied, manipulated, and took control from within. One by one, nations crumbled. The infected saw women as nothing but property. They sold them, traded them, married them as children, and punished them for disobedience. If a woman tried to escape, she was beaten, stoned, or killed. If she refused to submit, she was told she was worthless. In their world, a woman's only purpose was to obey, to serve, to be used, and still, the world did not fight back. Chapter 2. The Apocalypse begins. It happened faster than anyone expected. The infected swarmed every continent. They arrived as migrants, refugees, and travelers, but inside them burned the virus, the idea that only their way was right and all others must submit. At first, it was just isolated cases, small communities losing their culture as they changed their laws to accommodate the infected, women being forced to cover themselves or risk attack, journalists and activists being murdered for speaking out. Then the numbers grew. The streets were no longer safe. People whispered warnings but were silenced by the infected and by those who still believed in tolerance even as their cities burned. Governments surrendered. They made laws to protect the infected, punishing anyone who resisted. Censorship became absolute. The truth became illegal. Anyone who tried to speak out was branded a criminal, a traitor, an enemy of peace. But the infected did not want peace. They wanted conquest. Chapter 3. The Last Free Minds. A few remained untouched by the infection. They were the ones who still read history, questioned everything, and refused to submit. They were labeled as monsters, outcasts, threats to the new world. They gathered in secret, sharing the lost knowledge of the past. They spoke of the pirate warlord, of the thousands of temples, libraries, and civilizations he destroyed. They warned of what was coming, but their numbers were too small. One by one they were hunted. Some were executed in public, others were burned alive. The infection was merciless. And so the last free minds watched as their world collapsed. Cities fell, nations crumbled. The infected grew stronger, enforcing their laws upon the world. There was no freedom anymore, only submission. The resistance had failed. Epilogue. The end of the world. The infected stood upon the ruins of the old world, victorious. Their black flags waved in the wind, marking their final conquest. There were no more free minds, no more knowledge, no more wisdom, only obedience, fear, and darkness. This was the end of civilization. This was the price of sleeping too long. This was the world we could have saved. If only we had fought sooner. Final warning. The infection is already here. It is already spreading. If we do not wake up now, if we do not stand, speak and fight, then this story will not be fiction. It will be our future.
Ich möchte aber meine Ruhe haben. Ja. Ja, du bist leider da. Geh bitte. Lass mich in Ruhe. Lass mich in Ruhe. Verpiss dich jetzt, habe ich gesagt. Muss man schreien. Meine Fresse, wirklich.
بغير الله ودين الله وسنة نبي محمد بن عبد الله.
تكبير. الله أكبر.